But after I lost my scholarship to MCC, obviously I had to have the conversation where, my parents weren't going to pay for it. It was something I need to make sure I could pay for myself. And I think that was around the point where I was like, well, what am I actually doing here, kind of thing.
Eddie,
Yes.
post high school life. Talk to us about your experience.
Yeah. Well, one thing I know when you started the question is you're asking, like, if there's still kind of the pressure, like as much there was when you were going through school to go to college. And I feel like
Yeah.
we'd both, I mean, generally speaking, I think we'd all agree there's still some level of that pressure. But David and I went to or graduated from a smaller school where that was really, really expected. Um,
Mm.
it wasn't. It was a small school, and everyone who went there, like, there's a lot of students who went there who would, move on to schools like, Stanford and Princeton, and
Ivy
again, is
League
very
schools and
academically focused.
yeah.
Not a whole lot of attention paid to like extracurriculars or even a lot of the sports and whatnot. So, I feel like I definitely did. I'd imagine with Alex and Colby having gone to a much larger public high school where they have a lot of different options as far as your courses, and it kind of gets your wheels spinning a little bit. But I going through high school always planned on going to college, and I started at Mesa Community because my grades were good. They weren't great. So a full ride to ASU, from what I remember, wasn't really realistic, but it was really easy to go to Mesa Community for free. Um, so I did that, and then as far as going to Mesa Community for free, part of the guidelines of the scholarship was I had to maintain, I think, above a 3.5. And after my first semester, I got like I think it was literally like a 3.4, 3.3, like
Ugh.
not bad grades, not super far off, but not enough to maintain the scholarship. So
Just pause for a second. I think parents
yeah,
often today are in a tough position where they're preparing their children for school, and they know that when you're an adult, you realize actually how much money school is. It's absolutely absurd the amount of money it costs to go to college, and so there could be a pressure, I think, from parents uh, that gets put on kids to perform academically so that they can get scholarships. Because otherwise, how else is anyone going to pay for this?
yeah, and that's something I definitely remember our parents telling us from a pretty young age, where it's like we didn't grow up in like immense struggle or anything, but we definitely didn't have a lot of money. And again, expectations definitely says like if college is
It's like a hundred
important for
thousand
you and it
dollars for a
should
degree
be,
these
then
days. Yeah,
right. And they
more
they
than that, right?
I mean, I feel like it really all depends, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And even in-state tuition at ASU without a lot of scholarship help is really expensive. So
Yeah.
yeah, I remember understanding pretty early on that if I wanted to go to college, then I really needed to like get something as far as scholarships, or at least kind of understanding that that'd make things a lot easier. But after I lost my scholarship to MCC, obviously I had to have the conversation where, my parents weren't going to pay for it. It was something I need to make sure I could pay for myself. And I think that was around the point where I was like, well, what am I actually doing here, kind of thing. Because I was just studying for just kind of your basic. I had really no plan. I was like, well, it was almost like I knew what things I didn't want. I was like, well, I don't want to go to anything that requires more than 4 years. So that took off, like medical school or anything like that. And I was like, well, I also don't
Yeah.
want to do anything very math intensive. So that kind of threw like things like engineering. And so I was like, yeah, business seems pretty easy and it seems pretty vague and gives me options. So yeah, that was the
That
plan.
says
And
that
then
right there says something about your intelligence, though. Business, that's pretty easy. Like, business isn't easy for everyone. The fact that it came easy to you, like, says something about your own kind of intellectual prowess.
yeah, yeah, well, thanks, Brian. And I
Well,
think
go ahead. Hey, receive the compliment and the affirmation, Eddie. Going back to the earlier point where Colby was like, I don't know how Eddie is doing well in finance. He has no training whatsoever. I
Right.
mean, the fact that it's like easy to you and that like that's a sign of your giftedness in that area.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, at least my experience with school is school was I never found school to be like particularly challenging. Again, it's pretty easy for me to put in pretty minimal work or effort and maintain kind of around like a B average. Um, but again, after I started having to pay for school, I was like, well, this doesn't feel worth it for me. Or if I'm going to actually do this, I've got to really figure out what I want to do because I really didn't want to
Sure.
find myself in a position where I'd paid myself to the end of school just because it seems like, well, if you don't have any better ideas, might as well stay in school. And
Yeah.
again, I just didn't want to end up in a bunch of debt with a degree I didn't care about. So,
Like me.
like David, well, yeah, I don't know. You at
I do
least
care
have
about my degree.
some
I
good
do care about my
ones.
degree though, and I do think an like lest we just like poop on all undergraduate degrees here. I think
Mhm.
even going through an undergraduate degree does help you learn how to think a very specific way, which can be applied to a lot of different contexts. But anyway, sorry, go
Mhm.
on. I love my degree in
No,
history. Go on.
yeah, and I will say because I mean I've completed again this is over the span of a couple of years because originally I completed my first semester at MCC and then my second semester I was doing all online and that's around the time when I started doing door to door, which again was door to door sales, same as what David did. He did pest control, I did alarms, and my original plan was to again kind of help use that money now that I was paying for school and stay in school, but um, honestly, I saw a lot of a lot of the lives people even just through door to door sales were living, and I was like, well, I might be able to actually figure this out eventually, and it seems like um, again, it was something I actually felt fairly passionate about and was interested to improve at. And I was like, well, I'm going to work a lot harder than this than at school because I'm actually, interested in improving. So,
There you go. That
yeah, so I
motivation's
did,
everything.
yeah. And I know David mentioned it earlier. I really, really struggled at first because I am very naturally introverted. And I think a lot of those people skills and kind of the boldness it takes to do door to door was very much a learned skill and not something that came naturally. But yeah, my first month, and again, 100% commission selling alarms, I didn't sell anything. I was knocking probably 60, 70 doors a day out in Bay Area, California. And yeah, literally sold nothing to the point, and this is almost unheard of, but to the point where my managers they were like starting to make cuts with certain people that really weren't performing. And most of them it was because they weren't trying. But here I was actually trying, and I'm having the conversation with my manager where it's like, you've got kind of a couple of weeks to kind of show that you're headed in the right direction, or we're not
Yeah.
gonna, pay for your living and different things. So luckily, I kind of figured it out at the last minute, and I know that sense of accomplishment was big for me, and it really
Oh yeah.
kind of propelled me into
Like
the next couple of years, just trying to do
yeah,
better and better
got
and
some
better.
momentum
So
snowballed. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I'll say this one thing I picked up on with you is I mean, look, like everything I'm going to say is totally unfair because I live on the other side of the country and see you guys. I mean, now it's been a couple years since I've seen you in person, but I mean, even when I was coming around more regularly when I lived in Denver, it was like once or twice a year. But something I
right,
picked up on with you, Eddie, is you're certainly way more quiet once upon a time, way more quiet,
right,
and I felt like I needed to like get you going to get a response from you. I'd kind of dig a little bit. Not that there wasn't a tremendous amount of heart and personality there, but I always wanted more to know about you. It was interesting to hear some earlier reflections on how you are still sort of private with who you are. But there's a part of me that's like, I made that joke. Like, what are you hiding? Like, I want to know more about you and what I've seen. There's definitely like a before and after sales, and I've seen this after dimension of your personality, this part of you come forth that's way more extroverted. And uh, I've seen a lot more of your humor. You always told funny jokes in the background historically, but now you're more willing to like put them forth for
right.
people to for people to laugh at. And it's awesome to see. I think I'm so grateful for that sales experience for you because I feel like I know what's going on with you way more than I used to, even though I wanted to know more then. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of, I mean, I definitely tell this to people all the time that one of my favorite things just coming out of sales is I really did and still do feel like those skills are just so applicable more than just in a professional setting and as a way to
To
make
everything.
money where, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, where it felt like as I started to improve and see my numbers go up from averaging 0 a week the first month to maybe, two or three, four or five, and, so on and so forth, like it, um, obviously that felt great and it felt great
Here,
to feel
here,
like I was improving. Go ahead.
yeah, no, here's the other thing about it that we never really talk about here, which always amazed me, is that like all of you were like young. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
goodbye. I'm out. I'm going to the other side of the country. I'm going to figure out this thing far away from my parents. Like the amount
Mm-hmm.
of like maturity that happens just by being away from your parents and trying to figure things out on your own in a very adult capacity. I David came to my house in the middle of his sales experience and he almost like fell on his face on my doorstep. That's how hard it was. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely spent. He's like, people I know and a warm meal. This is amazing.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like you guys
Oh
all
yeah.
did
Yep.
something very, very hard. And it probably helped you mature quite a bit. Is that fair to say, Eddie?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was, I think even just growing up, having the discipline enforced on us where it's like, a lot of what you want and the way you want to feel and the things that you desire on kind of the other side of, sucking it up and doing things you may not want to do. So
Yeah.
I feel like it was probably the biggest thing like that in my life where I was like, this sucks, and especially that first month sucked. And I remember one night in particular where it was the end of a long day knocking, hadn't sold anything still, or probably a couple weeks in at this point. And I was just sobbing. I was talking to my mom, just sobbing on the phone, and
Yeah.
she was asking, she was like, "Well, oh, you can come home. Like, we'll get you a plane ticket. Like, it's fine. Like, you've worked hard. Like, blah blah
It's like,
blah."
no.
Yeah, and that was definitely part of stubbornness, where it's like, I can't lose at this. I think I'm a very competitive person. I was like, this would be
Uh,
me kind of admitting that I can't do
that's
it, kind of
is that
thing.
football? Is that football? Does that
Yeah,
come from
I think
football, the
that's a big
competitiveness?
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think football, I think I'm just naturally a very competitive person. I think football is, at least growing up, the biggest way that that was kind of shown. But I think really any game or anything where I feel like there's a winner, I feel like I've always like, really tried to do what I can to
To win.
be on the winning side of things. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely instilled a lot of discipline, and I think it's huge. And even what I'm doing now, which is very different, I think it almost sets the bar so low, where it's like you can get used to doing that for a year or two, coming out of that, you're
That's a
gonna feel like,
confidence builder, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.